People always say the deepest wounds come from your enemies. They are wrong. The deepest wound comes from the child you spent your entire life protecting. I built a company worth $90 million with my own hands. I sacrificed birthdays, vacations, and countless sleepless nights so my family would never struggle the way I had. But one ordinary Monday morning, my own son looked me in the eyes, smiled without a trace of guilt, and ordered security to throw me out of the building that carried my name. He thought he had won. He believed I was a helpless old man with nothing left. What he didn't know was that one forgotten file hidden years earlier would become the weapon that destroyed everything he had stolen. My name is Richard Hayes, and 28 years ago, I started Hayes Technologies in a tiny rented garage with one employee and an outdated computer. Success didn't come overnight. I worked 16-hour days, borrowed money I could barely repay, and often skipped meals just to keep the business alive. Slowly, clients trusted us. Investors arrived. Employees joined. The garage became an office. The office became headquarters. Before I realized it, Hayes Technologies had offices across the country and contracts worth millions. My greatest pride wasn't the money. It was knowing that one day my son, Daniel, would inherit a company built on honesty, loyalty, and hard work. At least, that was my dream. Daniel had grown up surrounded by luxury. Unlike me, he never experienced empty refrigerators or overdue bills. I wanted him to have opportunities one never had. Looking back, maybe that was my biggest mistake. As a child, he was charming and intelligent. Teachers praised him. Friends admired him. Whenever he made mistakes, I defended him. He'll mature. I always told my wife, Margaret. She wasn't so convinced. Richard, she warned me more than once. Daniel has never been told no. Someday he'll think the world belongs to him. I laughed every time. I wish I had listened. After business school, Daniel joined the company as a junior executive. I deliberately avoided giving him special treatment. If you want to lead this company someday, I told him, earn every promotion. He smiled politely. I understand, Dad, but behind that smile, something darker was growing. Within a few years, he surrounded himself with employees who admired power more than integrity. Expensive cars, luxury parties, private jets, and designer suits became his daily routine. Whenever I questioned unnecessary spending, he dismissed my concerns. Dad, this isn't the 1990s anymore. Big companies need big images. I disagreed. Companies need trust, not expensive watches. He rolled his eyes every time. Our conversations became arguments. Then Margaret passed away after a long illness. The day I buried my wife, I also buried part of myself. Daniel comforted me during the funeral. He hugged me tightly. I'll take care of everything, Dad. For the first time in months, I believed him. Grief clouded my judgment. I stopped attending every meeting. I trusted Daniel to manage daily operations while I recovered emotionally. That decision changed my life forever. Months passed. The board praised Daniel's confidence. Investors liked his aggressive expansion plans. Profits looked strong. Everything appeared perfect. Until strange things started happening. My longtime assistant, Helen, suddenly resigned after 23 loyal years. She didn't even say goodbye. Our chief financial officer retired without warning. 3 senior lawyers left within weeks. Whenever I asked Daniel what was happening, he smiled. People retire, Dad. Don't overthink everything. Maybe I wanted to believe him. Maybe I was simply too tired to fight. One rainy Tuesday morning, I arrived at headquarters earlier than usual. The receptionist looked shocked. Mr. Hayes, I didn't know you were coming. Her nervous voice caught my attention. I walked toward the executive floor. Before I reached my office, 2 security guards stepped in front of me. I'm sorry, sir. I frowned. What is this? You no longer have authorization to enter. I laughed. This building belongs to me. Neither guard moved. Then Daniel appeared. Perfect suit. Perfect smile. Perfect confidence. Good morning, Dad. What is this nonsense? He calmly handed me several documents. You officially resigned 3 weeks ago. I stared at him. I never resigned. You did. I most certainly didn't. He pointed toward the signature on the final page. My blood froze. It looked exactly like my signature. Every curve, every letter, every detail. But I had never signed those papers. This is forged. Daniel shrugged. The board disagrees. What board? The board that voted unanimously to appoint me as CEO. I felt the room spinning. You forged my signature. His smile never faded. Careful, Dad. False accusations aren't good for your reputation. My lawyers will destroy this. They already represent me. Every word felt like another knife in my chest. What have you done? I saved the company from outdated leadership. This company is my life's work. Not anymore. He nodded toward security. Escort Mr. Hayes off the property. The guards hesitated. They knew me. Many had worked for me for years. Daniel's voice became colder. That's an order. One guard lowered his eyes. I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes. They gently took my arm. Employees watched from every direction. Some looked heartbroken. Others avoided eye contact. No one dared speak. As the glass doors closed behind me, I stood alone in the pouring rain, holding nothing except the forged resignation papers. Everything I had built was gone. My company, my office, my reputation, even my own son. Daniel stood inside the lobby, watching through the glass with a satisfied smile, convinced he had erased me forever. He had no idea that years earlier, after surviving an attempted corporate takeover, I had hidden one confidential file in a place no one, not even my lawyers, knew existed. Inside that file was evidence powerful enough to expose every lie, every forged signature, and every crime waiting beneath Daniel's perfect image. And the moment I remembered where it was hidden, I realized my fight was far from over. The rain soaked my clothes as I stood outside the headquarters of Hayes Technologies, staring at the glass building that had once been my second home. Employees rushed past me with umbrellas, pretending not to notice the man who had built the company from nothing. My own son had stolen everything in a single morning. He thought I was defeated. He was wrong. As I drove away, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from anger. Daniel believed forged documents and a corrupt board vote had ended my story. What he didn't know was that years earlier, after surviving an attempted hostile takeover, I had prepared for the possibility that someone might one day try to steal my company. That was when I created the secret file. Only one person had ever known it existed, me. I drove to my old lake house, a place I hadn't visited since Margaret passed away. It was quiet, surrounded by tall pine trees, and filled with memories. Every room reminded me of happier days, when Daniel was still the boy who laughed while fishing from the dock instead of the man who had betrayed his own father. I walked into my study and looked at the old wooden bookshelf. Behind dozens of business books sat a worn leather journal that looked completely ordinary. I pulled it out and pressed a hidden latch inside the shelf. A soft click echoed through the room. A narrow compartment slowly opened. Inside was a small steel box. For years it had remained untouched. My heart pounded as I unlocked it. Inside were several USB drives, handwritten notes, copies of original company ownership documents, and a sealed envelope labeled in Margaret's handwriting. Open only if someone betrays you. I stared at her handwriting for several seconds before carefully opening the envelope. Inside was a short letter. Richard, if you're reading this, something terrible has happened. You always believed love could solve every problem, especially with Daniel. I prayed you were right. But if you're here, trust your instincts. Protect the truth, even if it means fighting the person we loved most. Tears filled my eyes. Even Margaret had seen the danger long before I did. I placed the letter back into the envelope and connected one of the USB drives to my laptop. Thousands of files appeared. Every original shareholder agreement, every legal amendment, every signed contract, every executive authorization. Most importantly, there was a complete digital archive showing that every major ownership change required my personal biometric verification, not just a handwritten signature. If someone had forged my signature, the system logs would prove it. Unless someone inside the company had disabled those security measures. That thought chilled me. This wasn't Daniel acting alone. Someone had helped him. I needed answers. There was only one person I still trusted. Helen. For 23 years, she had been my executive assistant. She knew every department, every executive, and every weakness inside the company. I searched through my contacts. Her number had changed. After several calls, an old colleague finally gave me her new address. The next morning I drove there. Helen opened the door, and the moment she saw me, tears filled her eyes. "Mr. Hayes, I need the truth." She stepped aside without saying another word. As soon as I sat down, she apologized. "I'm so sorry." "For what?" "I should have warned you sooner." My stomach tightened. "You knew?" She nodded slowly. "Daniel started replacing loyal employees almost a year ago. Anyone who questioned him was forced out." "What about the board?" "He promised several directors huge bonuses and stock options." "And the lawyers?" "He hired a new legal team months ago. Your attorneys were quietly dismissed after paperwork appeared with your signature." "My forged signature?" "Yes." Helen handed me a folder. "I've been collecting evidence ever since I realized something was wrong." Inside were emails, meeting schedules, internal memos, copies of suspicious financial transfers. Several directors had received millions of dollars shortly before the board voted to remove me. Bribes. My own son had bribed my board. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Why didn't anyone stop him? They were afraid. Afraid of Daniel? No. She looked directly into my eyes. They were afraid of Victor Kane. That name hit me like lightning. Victor Kane had spent years trying to buy Hayes Technologies. When I refused every offer, he disappeared. Or so I thought. "He's back." Helen nodded. "I saw him entering Daniel's office several times after you stopped coming to headquarters." Everything suddenly made sense. Daniel didn't have enough experience to organize something this sophisticated. Victor did. He used my son. I think they used each other. Before I could respond, Helen's phone rang. She looked at the screen and immediately turned pale. "It's an unknown number." "Answer it." She hesitated before putting the call on speaker. A calm male voice spoke. "Tell Richard Hayes to stop asking questions." Neither of us answered. The voice continued. "The past belongs in the past." The line disconnected. Silence filled the room. Someone was watching us. That evening, I reviewed every document Helen had saved. One file stood out. It was an internal security report. According to the report, all surveillance footage from the executive floor on the day my resignation was supposedly signed had been permanently deleted. Deleted, not lost. Someone had intentionally erased it. But whoever did it made one small mistake. The report also showed that a backup server automatically copied security footage every Friday night to an off-site archive. Hardly anyone knew the archive existed. If the backup hadn't been destroyed, it could contain the footage proving I never entered the office that day. It would expose the forged resignation. It would destroy Daniel's entire story. The archive was stored in a secure data facility outside the city. I decided to leave before sunrise. As I gathered the documents, Helen grabbed my arm. "Be careful. I've already lost everything." She shook her head. "No, they're scared of you now." The next morning, I drove toward the data facility. Halfway there, I noticed the same black SUV behind me. At first, I ignored it. Then it followed every turn, every lane change, every exit. Someone wasn't just watching anymore. Someone was hunting me. I pressed the accelerator, but the SUV stayed close. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without speaking. The same calm voice returned. "You should have stayed retired, Richard." The call ended. A second later, the black SUV suddenly accelerated, swerving directly toward my car at highway speed. I had only a split second to react. The black SUV slammed into the side of my car with terrifying force. My tires screamed against the wet highway as the steering wheel jerked violently in my hands. For a split second, I thought it was over. My car spun toward the guardrail, but years of driving on difficult roads while building my business helped me stay calm. I fought the steering wheel, hit the brakes carefully, and managed to stop just inches from the metal barrier. The SUV didn't stop. It sped away without hesitation. I sat there, breathing heavily, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. That wasn't an accident. Someone had tried to kill me. I reached for my phone and dialed 911. Within minutes, police officers and paramedics arrived. After checking that I wasn't seriously injured, One officer asked me what had happened. "A black SUV forced me off the road," I said. "Did you recognize the driver?" "No." "Any license plate?" "I only caught the last three numbers." The officer wrote everything down before looking at my damaged car. "It appears someone intentionally hit you." His words confirmed what I already knew. This was no random crash. Someone wanted to make sure I never reached the data facility. After giving my statement, I insisted on continuing my trip. The officers advised me to rest first, but I couldn't afford to lose time. If Daniel or Victor realized where I was going, the evidence might disappear forever. An hour later, I arrived at the secure archive building on the outskirts of the city. The facility manager, an older man named Thomas Reed, recognized me immediately. "Mr. Hayes," he said with surprise, "it's been years. I need access to the executive security archives." He checked his records. "They're still registered under your authorization." Relief washed over me. Daniel hadn't found this place. Thomas escorted me into a climate-controlled server room filled with endless rows of storage cabinets. After entering several authorization codes and scanning my fingerprints, he retrieved a sealed backup drive. This contains every archive security recording from headquarters. Exactly what I needed. I connected the drive to a secure workstation. The footage loaded slowly. Friday. The date matched the forged resignation documents. I fast-forwarded to the time Daniel claimed I had signed them. The executive hallway remained completely empty. No sign of me. Minutes later, Daniel entered the conference room with two board members and an unfamiliar man wearing a gray suit. Victor Kane. They carried several folders. An hour passed. Then everyone walked out smiling. I never appeared. Not once. My supposed resignation meeting had never happened. I copied the footage onto multiple encrypted drives. As I finished, Thomas frowned. "Mr. Hayes, what is it?" "I've just received an unusual request." "From whom?" He turned the computer monitor toward me. Someone had remotely submitted an emergency authorization demanding immediate destruction of today's archive. The request carried Daniel's digital executive approval. Thomas looked confused. He shouldn't even know this archive exists. My stomach tightened. He does now. Before we could react, the facility's fire alarm suddenly began blaring. Red emergency lights flashed throughout the building. Thomas checked the security monitor. 3 men wearing maintenance uniforms had entered through the loading dock. "They're not our employees." I immediately understood. "They're here for the evidence." Thomas locked the server room. "They won't get in easily." But heavy pounding echoed from the hallway. The metal door shook with every impact. Someone was trying to break inside. Thomas grabbed another hard drive and handed it to me. "Take this." "What about you?" "I'll slow them down. I'm not leaving you." "You have to." He pointed toward an emergency exit leading behind the building. "If they destroy those files, they'll win." Reluctantly, I slipped the drives into my briefcase and hurried toward the exit. As I stepped outside, I heard the sound of metal crashing behind me. They had broken through. I climbed into my car and drove away just as 2 black vehicles raced into the parking lot. They were seconds too late. That evening, I contacted one of the few lawyers I still trusted, Emily Carter. Unlike the attorneys Daniel had replaced, Emily had built her reputation by exposing corporate fraud. She listened carefully as I explained everything. The forged signature, the bribed board members, Victor Kane, the attempted murder, the archived footage. When she finished watching the video, she leaned back in silence. "This changes everything. Can we prove it?" "Oh, yes." She paused. "But we need more." "What else?" "We need proof connecting Daniel directly to the forgery and the attempted cover-up." I nodded. "I know." She looked at me seriously. "And Richard, yes, you need police protection." The next morning, Emily arranged a meeting with Detective Sarah Collins from the Financial Crimes Division. She carefully reviewed every document Helen had collected, every email, every financial transfer, every suspicious payment. Finally, she watched the archived security footage. When it ended, she folded her hands. "If this evidence is authentic, we have probable cause to open a criminal investigation." Those words felt like the first real victory I'd had since losing my company. Detective Collins immediately assigned forensic experts to verify the footage and examine the forged resignation papers. Within hours, they discovered something shocking. The signature wasn't simply copied. It had been created using a high-resolution scan from an old charity document I had signed years earlier. Someone had digitally recreated my handwriting. This wasn't amateur work, Collins said. No, it required planning and access. She nodded. We'll obtain search warrants. For the first time, I saw genuine concern on Daniel's face. Not because he had been arrested, because the police had officially entered Hayes Technologies headquarters. Employees watched as detectives carried boxes of financial records out of the building. News helicopters circled overhead. Reporters gathered outside the entrance. Television headlines spread across the city within hours. Police launched corporate fraud investigation at Hayes Technologies. Daniel confidently faced the cameras. These accusations are completely false, he announced. My father is emotionally unstable after retirement and is trying to damage the company. Many people believed him. After all, he was the respected CEO. I was just an old man claiming my own son had betrayed me. That night, Detective Collins called me. We searched Daniel's executive office. Did you find anything? Not there. My heart sank. But, she paused. We found something far more interesting. What? A locked storage room registered under Victor Kane's consulting company. And it contained industrial-grade document scanners, signature replication software. She took a deep breath, and a laptop with files labeled Project Inheritance. My hands tightened around the phone. Project Inheritance. Whatever was inside that laptop could expose the entire conspiracy. But before the forensic team could unlock it, the evidence room at police headquarters suddenly lost power. And when the backup generators came online, Victor Kane's laptop had vanished without a trace. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. What do you mean the laptop vanished? I asked Detective Sarah Collins. I mean exactly that, she replied. The evidence room lost power for less than 3 minutes. When the backup system came online, Victor Kane's laptop was gone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was stolen from police headquarters? Someone planned this carefully. The silence between us was heavy. If someone could steal evidence from a secure police building, then Victor's network was much larger than we had imagined. Sarah spoke again. We're investigating everyone who had access. Until then, trust no one. After hanging up, I barely slept. Someone had forged my signature. Someone had tried to kill me. Now someone had stolen evidence from the police. This wasn't just corporate fraud anymore. It was an organized conspiracy. The following morning, every news channel covered the missing laptop. Daniel appeared outside company headquarters looking calm and confident. I have complete faith in the investigation, he told reporters. The truth will clear my name. Watching him speak so confidently made my blood boil. He was either an excellent liar, or he believed every piece of evidence against him would disappear. Emily Carter arrived at my lake house carrying a thick folder. I have good news. I could use some. The police recovered deleted financial records from Hayes Technologies. I looked at her hopefully. They found payments? She smiled. Millions of dollars. Several transfers had been sent to shell companies over the past 18 months. Each company eventually led back to Victor Kane. Daniel hadn't just stolen my company. He had secretly been draining its money. Can they prove Daniel approved the transfers? Emily nodded. Digitally, yes. Forensic experts confirmed they originated from his executive account. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to smile. Daniel's empire was beginning to crack. But Emily wasn't finished. There is one problem. What now? Digital records are powerful. But we still need a human witness. Someone who had actually seen Daniel and Victor working together. Someone willing to testify under oath. Finding that person wouldn't be easy. Most former executives were too frightened to get involved. Others had accepted generous settlement payments and disappeared. Days passed without progress. Then Helen called. Richard, you found someone? I think so. She gave me an address. An old apartment building across town. When I knocked on the door, an elderly man answered cautiously. He recognized me immediately. Mr. Hayes. His name was Samuel Brooks. For 15 years, he had worked as head of corporate security before retiring quietly. "I've been expecting this visit," he said. Inside his apartment, Samuel placed a worn notebook on the table. "I kept records." "Records of what?" "Everything." He explained that months before my removal, Daniel had ordered unusual late-night meetings. Visitors entered headquarters after business hours. Security cameras were temporarily disabled. Special access cards appeared without authorization. I questioned it. "What happened?" "Daniel told me to stop asking questions." Samuel opened his notebook. Every meeting had been documented. Dates, times, names, license plate numbers. One entry caught my attention. Victor Kane. Repeated visits. Always after midnight. Always through the private executive entrance. "I copied these before retiring," Samuel said. "Why?" He looked down. "Because your wife once told me something." I frowned. "Margaret." He nodded. "She said, if anything strange ever happens in this company, promise me you'll protect Richard." My chest tightened. Even after all these years, Margaret was still protecting me. Samuel wasn't finished. "I have something else." He unlocked an old filing cabinet and removed a small memory card. This came from a backup security camera. I thought all the footage was deleted. So did Daniel. Samuel smiled slightly. He forgot about the loading dock camera. We inserted the memory card into my laptop. Grainy footage appeared. It showed Daniel and Victor entering headquarters at 1:17 a.m. They weren't alone. Behind them walked one of the company's legal directors, carrying several document boxes. Timestamps confirmed the recording had been made just days before my forged resignation. The three men disappeared into the executive floor. Hours later, they returned, carrying empty boxes. Emily examined the footage carefully. "This places Victor inside the building, but not the forgery." "True." She paused. "But combined with everything else," she smiled. "This is becoming overwhelming." Later that afternoon, Detective Collins arrived personally. She watched Samuel's footage twice. Then she turned toward him. "Mr. Brooks." "Yes." "Would you testify in court?" Samuel didn't answer immediately. Finally, he nodded. "I've stayed silent long enough." That single sentence changed everything. The police officially added Samuel as a protected witness. Within hours, search warrants were expanded. Officers raided several properties connected to Victor Kane. One warehouse contained shredded financial documents. Another held expensive artwork purchased with company funds. Then came the biggest discovery. Investigators recovered a hidden accounting server. Unlike Victor's stolen laptop, this server had escaped destruction. Forensic experts worked through the night. The next afternoon, Detective Collins called. "We've recovered encrypted emails." "Between Daniel and Victor?" "Yes." I held my breath. "What did they say?" "They discuss removing you." My pulse quickened. "Anything else?" Sarah hesitated. "There are references to something called Phase 2. Phase 2. We don't know what it means." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. If stealing my company was only Phase 1, then what was Phase 2? Before I could ask another question, Emily rushed into the room holding her phone. "Richard, what happened?" She turned the screen toward me. Breaking news flashed across every television network. Police issue arrest warrant for Victor Kane. For the first time, Victor Kane was officially a fugitive. I expected relief. Instead, I felt something far worse. Because men like Victor Kane didn't run, unless they were planning one final move. That evening, I returned to the lake house. The front door was slightly open. I was certain I had locked it. Every light inside was off. Carefully, I stepped into the living room. Nothing appeared disturbed. Then I noticed something on my desk. A single photograph. It showed Margaret and me standing beside Daniel on his 10th birthday. Across the picture, someone had written 3 words in red ink. "You're next, Richard." I hadn't heard anyone enter. But as I slowly turned around, I realized I wasn't alone in the house. The lights were still off, and the only sound inside the lake house was the ticking of the old grandfather clock Margaret had loved. I slowly turned around. A tall figure stood near the kitchen doorway. For a heartbeat, I thought it was Victor Kane. Then the man stepped into the moonlight. It was Detective Sarah Collins. She lowered her service weapon. "Richard, don't move." My heart was racing. What are you doing here? I got a silent alarm from the security company. Someone broke into your house. I looked around. So whoever left this photograph is already gone. Sarah examined the picture lying on my desk. Across Margaret's smiling face were the words written in red ink. You're next, Richard. She carefully placed the photograph into an evidence bag. They wanted to frighten you. They've succeeded. She looked at me firmly. No, they're frightened. I frowned. What makes you say that? People who are winning don't threaten witnesses. They eliminate them quietly. Whoever did this is desperate. Her words stayed with me long after she left. Maybe she was right. For the first time since Daniel stole my company, our investigation had forced Victor Kane into hiding, exposed illegal financial transfers, uncovered forged documents, and produced a protected witness willing to testify. The walls were closing in. The next morning, Emily Carter called before sunrise. Richard, we've decrypted the accounting server. I immediately drove to her office. Stacks of printed emails covered the conference table. Emily pointed to one conversation between Daniel and Victor. My hands trembled as I read it. Victor, the old man still trusts you. Daniel, he always will. Victor, good. Get the signatures before the board meeting. Daniel, leave the forgery to me. I stared at the screen in disbelief. There it was. Not suspicion, not theory. A direct conversation discussing the forged signatures. Emily smiled. This is enough to support fraud charges. But another message caught my attention. It had been sent only 3 weeks earlier. Victor, Phase 2 begins after complete ownership transfer. Daniel. And Richard? Victor's reply chilled my blood. Victor, he won't be a problem for long. The room fell silent. Emily slowly looked up. I think the highway attack wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. She nodded. They intended to make sure you never fought back. Detective Collins arrived an hour later. After reading the emails, she immediately contacted the district attorney. Within hours, arrest warrants were approved. One for Victor Kane, one for Daniel Hayes. But there was one problem. Victor had disappeared. No one knew where he was. Daniel, however, was still acting like nothing had happened. That afternoon, Hayes Technologies hosted its annual investor conference. Television cameras broadcast the event live. Daniel stood confidently on stage before hundreds of shareholders. Our company has never been stronger, he announced. Applause filled the ballroom. Then the ballroom doors opened. Detective Sarah Collins entered with 6 uniformed officers. Every conversation stopped. The cameras turned. Daniel's smile disappeared. She walked directly onto the stage. Daniel Hayes. He forced a laugh. This isn't the time. She ignored him. You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, forgery, obstruction of justice, and multiple financial crimes. The ballroom erupted. Reporters rushed forward. Investors stared in disbelief. Daniel tried to maintain his composure. There must be some mistake. Sarah handed him the warrant. There isn't. As officers placed handcuffs around his wrists, Daniel looked across the room. Our eyes met. For the first time since this nightmare began, he looked afraid. Real fear. As he was escorted away, reporters shouted questions from every direction. Did you steal your father's company? Did you forge the documents? Where is Victor Kane? Daniel said nothing. That evening, every major news channel carried the same image. The CEO of Hayes Technologies being led away in handcuffs. Public opinion changed overnight. People who had doubted me began calling with apologies. Former employees came forward with new information. Anonymous emails flooded the police. The investigation grew larger every hour. 2 days later, Detective Collins invited Emily and me to police headquarters. We found Victor. I leaned forward. Where? She placed several surveillance photos on the table. Victor had rented a private cabin deep in the mountains. We're moving in tonight. Hours later, a tactical police team surrounded the cabin. Officers repeatedly ordered Victor to surrender. No response. Finally, they forced the door open. The cabin was empty. Victor had escaped only minutes earlier. But he hadn't left empty-handed. He had taken several bags and burned documents inside the fireplace. Most of the papers were destroyed. Most. One partially burned folder survived. Forensic specialists carefully separated the damaged pages. The following afternoon, Sarah called me again. "Richard, what did you find?" "The folder contains a written agreement." "Between Daniel and Victor?" "Yes." I closed my eyes. "What does it say?" She took a deep breath. "It confirms Victor would receive 40% of Hayes Technologies after your removal." I couldn't speak. Daniel hadn't just betrayed me. He had secretly agreed to sell nearly half of the company I built to the man who had spent years trying to steal it. Greed had completely consumed him. The district attorney announced that criminal charges would move forward immediately. A trial date was scheduled. The entire country seemed to be watching. But as I prepared for court, Detective Collins arrived with unexpected news. Her expression told me something was wrong. "What happened?" I asked. She slowly placed another file on the table. "We interviewed Daniel this morning, and he wants to cooperate." I looked at her in surprise. "He confessed?" "Partially." She nodded. "But before he signed his full statement," she paused. "He told us something we never expected." "What?" "He said Victor Kane didn't plan this alone." A cold shiver ran down my spine. There was someone else involved from the very beginning. Sarah opened the file to the final page. I stared at the name written there. The name belonged to someone I had trusted for more than 20 years. Someone I had never once suspected. I couldn't believe the name staring back at me. Michael Turner. For more than 20 years, Michael had been my chief financial officer. He had attended family dinners, celebrated company milestones with us, and even stood beside me at Margaret's funeral. I had trusted him like a brother. "This has to be a mistake," I whispered. Detective Sarah Collins shook her head. "Daniel admitted Michael was the one who introduced him to Victor Kane nearly 2 years ago." I felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath me. "Why would he do that?" Sarah opened another folder. "Money." The investigation revealed that Michael had secretly received millions of dollars through offshore accounts controlled by Victor Kane. In exchange, he leaked confidential financial information, helped hide illegal transfers, and instructed Daniel on how to bypass the company's internal controls. Every betrayal suddenly made sense. The missing documents, the disappearing employees, the forged signatures, the deleted security footage. It had never been one man's crime. It had been a carefully planned conspiracy. Within hours, police arrested Michael at his luxury penthouse. During the search, investigators discovered encrypted hard drives, fake contracts, and detailed notes describing every stage of the takeover. The most shocking discovery was a handwritten notebook. On the final page, Michael had written, "Once Richard is removed, Daniel becomes CEO. Victor gains 40%. I receive $10 million in retirement overseas." His own handwriting destroyed any chance of denying the conspiracy. The trial began 3 months later. The courthouse was surrounded by reporters from across the country. Every seat inside was filled. I sat beside Emily Carter while Daniel, Victor Kane, and Michael Turner entered the courtroom in handcuffs. Daniel looked exhausted. The confident businessman who had thrown me out of my own company was gone. He looked broken. The prosecution carefully presented the evidence. First came the forged resignation papers. Then the forensic experts explained how my signature had been digitally copied from an old charity document. The archived security footage proved I had never entered headquarters on the day I supposedly resigned. Samuel Brooks testified about the secret late-night meetings. Helen described how loyal employees had been forced out. Financial experts traced millions of dollars flowing through shell companies connected to Victor Kane. Finally, Detective Collins presented the recovered emails. The courtroom fell silent as one message appeared on the screen. "Victor, leave the forgery to me. Daniel, he'll never know until it's too late." There was no explaining those words away. When it was Daniel's turn to testify, he lowered his head. "I was jealous," he admitted quietly. "I spent my whole life trying to live up to my father." His lawyer asked, "Did your father mistreat you?" Daniel looked toward me. "No. He gave me everything." "So why?" Tears filled his eyes. "Because I wanted more." The courtroom remained silent. No one could blame poverty. No one could blame abuse. It was simple greed. Victor Kane refused to testify. Michael Turner also remained silent. After a 6-week trial, the jury returned. The foreperson stood. We find the defendants guilty on all counts. Daniel closed his eyes. Victor stared straight ahead without emotion. Michael buried his face in his hands. The judge sentenced Victor Kane to a lengthy prison term for fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder, and multiple financial crimes. Michael Turner received a long prison sentence for corporate fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. Daniel was sentenced for forgery, fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Although the judge acknowledged his cooperation during the investigation, his role in betraying his own father could not be ignored. Justice had finally been served. Following the criminal convictions, the civil court declared every forged document invalid. My resignation was erased. Daniel's appointment as CEO was canceled. Ownership of Hayes Technologies was legally restored to me. The board of directors resigned one after another. Several members publicly apologized for allowing greed to influence their decisions. I accepted their resignations. A company built on integrity deserved leaders with integrity. Instead of returning as full-time CEO, I chose a different path. I appointed an experienced executive with an outstanding reputation to lead daily operations while I remained chairman of the board. The company wasn't about one person. It was about protecting the values on which it had been built. Months later, Hayes Technologies recovered stronger than ever. Clients returned. Employees regained confidence. New investors praised the company's transparency. The company that had nearly been destroyed by greed became an example of accountability and resilience. One quiet afternoon, I visited Margaret's grave carrying a small bouquet of white lilies. I sat beside the headstone for a long time. "You were right," I said softly. "You saw the warning signs before I did." A gentle breeze moved through the trees. For the first time since her passing, I felt at peace. As I stood to leave, my phone rang. It was Detective Sarah Collins. "I thought you'd like to know," she said. "What is it?" "The last of Victor Kane's hidden offshore accounts has been recovered." "How much?" "Almost $80 million. I smiled. "Then every victim will finally receive justice." After ending the call, I looked at the city skyline in the distance. For years, I believed success was measured by wealth, buildings, and business achievements. I was wrong. Success is measured by character. Money can build a company. Power can impress strangers. But integrity is the only thing that survives betrayal. My son stole my company, forged my signature, and threw me out like garbage. He believed he had buried me forever. Instead, his own greed buried him. And as I walked away from Margaret's grave, I realized the greatest revenge had never been destroying my enemies. It was proving that truth, patience, and justice would always outlive lies.